Welcome to the Jeffers Brief, only on Contra Radio Network.
Hello, everybody. I gotta get this fixed somehow, some way. Nope, that's wrong. That's wrong. Fix it. That's better. Hey, again, well, you know, the way I got the studio set up, I got the monitors up here, and I have to watch everything. In the meantime, I am John Jeffers. I want to welcome you to the Jeffers Brief. I'm your host, founder, executive producer here at the Contra Radio Network. Later on this afternoon, I'm going to be on the Two Crazy Guys, Don Lowry and Mark Boyle's show. We got some interesting things in play. I don't want to say anything about it because too many times when I think I got something really good going or it could happen, it all turns to crap. Not going to do that anymore. So again, just want to say welcome to the Jeffers Brief. All right. Interesting story just breaking today. As you know, I've been following this coup attempt. It's been going on for over 2.5 years, this investigation. Rumor has it that there have been sealed indictments already handed down. They're holding on to them. However, this just came out. And this is interesting. Was it Fox News and Gateway Pundit are saying that the U.S. Attorney recommends criminal charges against Andrew McCabe, and the Department of Justice rejects his last-minute appeal. Yeah, it's a good start, but there are so many more people deserving of indictments, and you and I both know that. So U.S. Attorney Jesse Liu has recommended charging former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Now remember, McCabe's wife was running as a Democrat, I think, for the Senate or for the House. I can't remember which one, back in 2018. So the potential charges against McCabe are related to his false statements to the feds in the FBI's investigation into who? Our favorite failed Democratic candidate, Hillary, I gotta kill you, Clinton. Fox News is reporting that the U.S. Attorney has learned that the Justice Department rejects a last-ditch appeal from the former top FBI official. McCabe, the former deputy and acting director of the FBI, appealed the decision of the U.S. Attorney for Washington all the way up to Jeffrey Rosen, the Deputy Attorney General, but he rejected that request according to a person familiar with the situation. A source close to McCabe's legal team said they received an email from the DOJ which said, quote, "The department rejected your appeal of the United States Attorney's Office decision in this matter. Any further inquiry should be directed to the United States Attorney's Office." Comey, confident Benjamin Witz, said in a Lawfare blog post a couple weeks ago that he expected former FBI Deputy Director McCabe to be indicted any day now. Witz wrote in the blog post that he was shocked, I tell you, to find out federal prosecutors are in the final stages of deciding whether to indict McCabe on charges he lied to federal investigators, referring to the New York Times bombshell released a couple weeks ago. The potential indictment of McCabe stems from the Inspector General's findings that he lied to federal investigators. If Martha Stewart, her only crime was not insider trading, it was lying to FBI agents, federal agents. She went to prison for that. Why shouldn't McCabe suffer the same consequences? Now, McCabe was referred to the Office for Prosecution in the spring of 2018, and they're finally getting around to maybe indicting him. This is dragged out because of internal deliberations, and the case is taking so long that the term expired for the grand jury evidence. Imagine that. Say it ain't so. One of the lead prosecutors on the case has since left the DOJ out of frustration, according to the New York Times. Now, the Times has reported that McCabe's lawyers met with Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, who was involved in the decision whether to prosecute the former FBI official. Mr. Witz says these meetings only take place when an indictment is imminent. Now, McCabe sued the FBI over his firing, then landed a gig as what? A contributor. A contributor for what? I don't even know. Which reminds me, what is it we want to say here? No, that's not it. Oh, you know what? No, let's not do that one. We have you know what? I don't know. No, I don't want to do that one. Hey, no. Nope. That's coming. Nope, that's coming. Like I said, most of you know that I've been following this coup attempt, mainly because I go, it's driving me bonkers. By the way, for you preppers out there who have gotten a hold of me, I have a little something for you. Let's talk about the 7 deadly prepper sins, shall we? From the shtfblog.com comes this nice little thing here. It's by Doc Montana. He's a contributing author to the blog and to Survival Catch. What do we got here? Common sense has limits. Sitting in a comfy chair designing your post-apocalyptic survival strategy can be entertaining. But play your scenario out further with all the grit of a real grid-down incident, and you'll quickly see that many prepper plans might be little more than lipstick on a pig. Or Nancy Pelosi, as the case may be. So here are the 7 deadly prepper sins based on observations while hanging out next to the recycling bin to see what people toss into it. Number 1, searching out others with like minds. Everyone can disagree about something. Now, it's true, because some people don't think this show's that good. They're wrong, of course, because it is good. Spouses have pledged their lives to each other, still snap and growl over the smallest things. Even tight families blow up at each other over the holidays. So why would you want to shack up with or bug out with a bunch of people that you don't plan on being able to disagree with? My point exactly is this. You should stock up on smart, talented, skilled, strong people. Avoid the yes men who you think share the same values, purpose, and identity as you do. Instead, you should be ready to make a community work with diverse ideas, skills, honest disagreements, not just because you don't like it. And I dare say, democracy. But if you need a dictatorship of like minds to survive, then I'd give it a 50-50 chance of ending well for you and your clan without the likely intervention of competing clans. Under constant stress, I'd give a compound of like minds 10% or less chance. In other words, look, it's okay to disagree. You don't want yes men saying no yes and kissing your ass every time you turn around on a decision in a grid down situation, because eventually you're going to make the wrong decision. It is much better to surround yourself with people, 1, who are smarter than you, and 2, aren't afraid to say, look, you're wrong and this is why. And it's okay for you to listen and say, you know what, maybe I am wrong. It's okay. That's what they're saying. Number 2, have plenty of items for barter. Now, I hear this all the time and cannot believe it's still a thing. So much so that I've met preppers who have easily crossed the line from prepping to hoarding. Now, barter is fine when things are good, but barter at any other time is just asking to be robbed or worse. Let's be honest about it. Now, I'm not against bartering, but Doc Montana's rule for barter is simple. My skills for your stuff, or my skills for your skills. Once your own stuff enters the barter question, you are on the losing end of the deal. Unless you are trading with a truly virtuous person, you will be considered a minor, soft obstacle between your stuff and what someone else wants. And those truly virtuous will unfortunately be weeded out quickly by the black evil that will populate the world without rule of law landscape. Okay? Number 3. There will be new currency of bullets or silver coins or, Look, the simple brick wall that a new currency will hit is in the unknown quantity. The paycheck-to-paycheck prepper sees the small picture, but those with real assets will need to move wealth around in more than scrap gold or pre-1965 dimes. All hard assets will rapidly exceed the value to small pseudo-currency items. For example, if we are to maintain an economy of scalable resources like housing, land, and employment, then there will be a need for large-scale asset movement. And boxes of 22 shells won't cut it. Further, for currency to work, it must have agreed upon value that transfers between people. Paying $1 million for a painting does not mean you have $1 million of collateral. It just means in your personal economic sphere, you chose a painting over liquid asset of $1 million. It also means you now have a piece of colorful canvas that requires care and feeding if it is to reamass any value when we reemerge from the darkness. But until then, the currency of the future is limited to the need and imagination between any two parties at that specific moment in time. And as we have seen today, people will trade anything to save their loved one's life. And I'd argue that it's impossible to negotiate fairly when one of the parties has an empty belly. I.e., if I give a bag of rocks to you and say, this is worth whatever, the other party has to agree, you know what, I agree. This bag of rocks is worth that, exactly. In other words, both sides have to agree that they both have to agree to the intrinsic value of whatever item it is you're attempting to sell, buy, barter, whatever. All right? That's what he's saying. Stockpile of foods you're used to eating. Recycled wisdom will have you believe that you should store food that you eat regularly. That way your digestive system and taste buds will be fine without eating on the run. Bug out mistake is doubly bad. First, bug out food should be chosen on an entirely different nutritional philosophy than daily food. In fact, it is roughly the opposite. Look, your daily food intake should be a balance of fats, proteins, and carbs with a preference towards the freshest foods closest to their natural state. In other words, not processed. Bug out food, on the other hand, is highly processed with a long shelf life, high in sodium, preservatives, and far from fresh. And if your current daily diet mimics bug out food, well, then you likely have some dietary issues that will cause you more serious problems whether you need to bug out or not. Just sample your prepping food to know what you're in for. That's all. For example, dehydrated eggs. They don't resemble the eggs in the shell. I'm telling you that now, my friend. But they're edible. That's all. All right, counting on only 9 meals from anarchy. The concept here is that the civil society will only remain so as long as bellies are full. And after 3 days of no food, it will be game on without rule of law. In reality, the without rule of law alarm clock will go off long before the pangs of hunger drive our reactions. More likely, the flow of information or lack thereof will push society over the edge. An EMP would cause near instant reaction and not in a good way. You know that. The first unchallenged looting will signal the end of civility, and using recent history as a model, depending on the situation, it could be 3 days, 3 hours, even 3 minutes to anarchy. So read the signs, jump the gun. Number 6, ending your preps with 3 ways to make a fire. The mistake here is not in the number of ways to start a fire, nor in the selection of choices, but rather in the outright lack of ways to maintain a fire. Campfires are hungry beasts. Even a small fire requires pounds of fuel per hour. An oversight that can be deadly in more ways than one. Now, the initial tender of a fire is small and fast burning, but a mature campfire requires a supply of larger fuel that will only burn as efficiently as the wood is processed. Okay? Dragging a downed tree across the fire is hardly a smart play for controlling a bug-out fire. So have on hand big tools including an axe, bow saw, hatchet, in fact, Add a splitting maul, splitting wedge, and sledgehammer if you are truly serious. And don't forget the gloves. Number 7, believing you are prepared. Now, a common theme that runs through prepper-oriented advertising, and in fact, the very word prepper is the belief that you can be prepared. In reality, prepping is nothing but a continuum of spectrum of possible situations for which you have a potential solution. Of course, you should work towards preparedness, but the deadly sin here is to reach a point of contentment where you now believe you have the means and skills necessary to survive your predicted scenarios. But here's the catch. Things on planet Earth are actually quite good right now. If you've invested money, time, energy, and loads of thought into the project, it is easy to let that project drive your future decisions. Patiently waiting for a collapse or hoping for a little economic or civil shakeup so you can go into active prepper mode is not only dangerous, but it's also unpatriotic. It means you have given up on the great American experiment. Any downfall might get your prepper juices flowing, but it will traumatize and terrorize children who are the next generation of leaders of this great country. Stockpiled preps should never be a comfortable excuse to burn down institutions that America built over centuries. Like a 250-year-old tree, once you cut it down, the landscape is forever changed. It will never be as good as it was, at least not for another few centuries. So prep with goodness in your heart, not darkness in your future. Just because you prep does not mean you will survive a critical incident. Let's be honest, a lot of it has to do with luck. It has to do with what time it happens, where you are in relation to the incident. You follow? It is a lot of different variables that come into play. You may prep and you may not survive the critical incident itself. So maybe your preps will go to someone else who will find it. I don't know. But just because you prep does not mean you will survive. There are so many variables that go into each and every scenario. Heck, think about when you get in your car and you drive down the road. Think about all the things in play that you have to keep an eye out for so you don't crash into another person, an object, you get injured, somebody else gets injured. You know what I'm saying? And that's just a simple analogy. My point is this. There are so many variables in play that just because you prep doesn't mean you're going to survive. What it does mean that if you just, you know what they say, but for the grace of God go I. If you're so blessed and that happens, there you go. Now look, there's plenty of room for debate with these 7 deadly prepper sins. All 7 are based in reality. Whether science, psychology, history, or economics, we humans have amassed a great wealth of knowledge and personal predictability. Therefore, imagining anything to the contrary is pure fiction, simply because there is little evidence to support the recycled intel and ample evidence to discount it. So let's think about this. Just think about what we talked about. For my prepper friends, there you go. My prepper listeners, there you have it. Something to think about. That's all I'm saying. Now, for some reason, and I don't know why, but it appears, mind you, that in this month so far, California is listening to more downloads and episodes on the Contra Radio Network. Now, maybe they're catching a little bit from KYAH 540 AM in Delta, Utah, which this show and Conservative Underground with Don Lowry and Mark Boyle, the prepper guy. All 3 are here on the Contra Radio Network. We all 3 also have shows on KYH. Maybe they're catching some stuff there. Inside every progressive is a totalitarian screaming to get out. But here we have something for you people out in California. Don't forget you people in Canada. I'm watching what's going on up there. You listeners in the Yukon, that province has more listeners on CRN than the rest of Canada combined. Nice job, guys. Thanks for listening, Canada. Especially the Yukon people. California judges gone wild. This is Lloyd Billingsley from Front Page Mag. And if you're in California, you probably already know about this. But on September 28th, near Modesto, California, Dutch Hollow Farms will open a memorial for Ronald Ron Singh. He was a legal immigrant from Fiji who came to America to become a police officer, if you remember this. Singh's wife and child will be the first to enter the massive maze bearing the officer's image. And those paying tribute have good cause to track the path of the man charged with killing him. If I remember right, he was shot and killed in the line of duty on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Was it last year or the year before? Anyways. So on December 26, 2018, one day after Christmas, here you go, that's the date, Singh pulled over a suspected drunk driver. He pulled a gun and shot the officer. The shooter fled with 7 other illegals aiding his flight before police apprehended him in Bakersfield. The accused shooter called himself Gustavo Perez Arriaga, one of his many aliases, but later claimed his real name was Pablo Virgin Mendoza. The gang-affiliated illegal had 2 previous DUI arrests. His case is being handled by Stanislaus County Superior Court Judge Ricardo Cordova, a former public defender appointed as a judge in 2003 by Governor Gray Davis. And if you recall, he was a Democrat who was recalled that year in favor of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, on January 2, Cordova suspended the proceedings against the accused cop killer on the grounds that his mental competency had come into question. It's a dubious claim, but it's a predictable tactic by the defense. Cordova is also handling the case of 5 illegals arrested for helping Mendoza flee. The judge complained that having all 5 in court at one time would be unwieldy, a claim even more dubious than the mental competency of the accused cop killer. To the surprise of no one, he was indeed competent, and in May, Cordova set a preliminary hearing on December 10th, nearly a year after the murder of Ronald Singh. His many supporters have good cause to wonder whether Cordova will reprise his role as a public defender with the accused illegal. Now, last month, California's First District Court of Appeals, packed with Jerry Brown appointees, reversed the gun conviction of Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, a previously deported criminal illegal. Say it ain't so. Previously deported and he's back? No, that can't happen. Say that ain't so. In what amounted to a show trial, Garcia Zarate was acquitted of murder in July 1, 2015 shooting of who? That's right, Kate Steinle, 32, on a San Francisco pier. Despite the reversal of the gun charge, the illegal did in fact discharge the weapon that killed Steinle. We all know that. Now in May, Ismael Hawazo Jardinez, or Hardinez, crashed into a Sutter County residence, claiming the lives of 3 people, including a 10-year-old child. The drunken illegal attempted to flee the scene, but Judge David Ashby, a 2016 appointee of Governor Jerry Brown, allowed Hardinez to post bail. He was arrested by ICE and found to possess 2 stolen firearms, 2 dozen cell phones, and $12,000 in cash. In California, the anti-ICE prejudice goes all the way to the top. In 2016, California Supreme Court Justice Tani Cantil Sakaya charged that federal agents were stalking illegals in courthouses. The former blackjack dealer thus showed her hand as an advocate for violators of U.S. immigration law. Other judges were eager to cut convicted terrorists some slack. Last month, U.S. District Judge Garland Burrell ordered the release from federal prison of Hamid Hayat, convicted on terrorism charges in 2006. That delighted Hayat's defenders, CARE, and the Muslim Legal Fund of America, who had gone judge shopping. Now, by releasing Hayat, Burrell was following the recommendations of Magistrate Judge Deborah Barnes, who allowed relatives of Hayat to testify from Pakistan by a video hookup. It remains unclear how these witnesses were identified, under what law they were sworn in, and how they were cross-examined. To the surprise of no one, they testified that Hayat could not have attended a terrorist training camp, one of the crimes for which he was duly convicted. Despite the crowing of CARE bosses, the premature release of Hyatt does not mean that he is innocent of the original charges. By the way, side note here, when you go to court, you are not found guilty or innocent. You are found guilty or not guilty. Period. You will never, ever, ever say, a judge say, or a jury verdict come back, well, he's innocent. It's not guilty. Got it? Remember that. Don't say stupid things. I'm trying to help you here. So back in 2015, Islamic terrorists Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik gunned down 14 people in San Bernardino. You all remember that. The Muslims carefully planned the attack, rigging explosives to kill first responders. Had the terrorists survived, Californians could easily believe that state courts might have ignored their motive and questioned their mental competence. Now, California Attorney General Xavier Becerra, once on Hillary Clinton's shortlist as a running mate, recently tipped his hand that 10 million illegals reside in California. Automatically registered to vote by the DMV, illegals have become the Democrats' electoral college. So Democrats protect even the violent criminals among them at all cost. State judges, in effect, serve as a pro bono law firm for illegals and rank their concerns above those of their victims. As legal immigrants and legitimate citizens might note, it was a private entity, not state government, that created the memorial to Ron Singh. Those who show up on September 28th will be admitted free, and all donations will go toward the Corporal Ronnie Singh Memorial Fund. Meanwhile, legal immigrants, legitimate citizens, and anyone concerned about public safety might monitor the way former public defender Ricardo Cordova handles the case of Pablo Virgin Mendoza, accused of gunning down Ron Singh. So mark your calendars now for December 10th. Huh? Oh, here you go. You're going to love this one, guys. I'm serious. You're going to love this one. You have now got, I'm going to warn you now that Western table manners are now racist. I know. Well, what are you going to do? You know, what do we got going on up there? Yeah. So, your table manners are now racist. Because, well, you're a Westerner. We're going to... There you have it. Hey, there are new rules again, and this has been reported by PJ Media. So you want everyone paying attention. Eating your food the way you've been taught to, with forks and knives, because this is the West and that's what we do, is racist. And it hurts people who are still upset about colonization from hundreds of years ago. So writing in today's Parents, Joshana Maharaj is outraged. Outraged, I tell you. Just outraged that some teacher somewhere in Canada told a little girl not to eat rice with her hands. Now, this prompted Maharaj to write about learning how to eat around the world where using hands is acceptable, and how the West is just racist by using utensils or something. Who knows? So she writes, recently, I chatted with someone who told me a story about her young niece who goes to a prestigious preschool and was eating rice with her hands at lunchtime. The feedback her parents received was that this child needed to work on her table manners and to use proper cutlery to eat. I immediately felt a rush of anger bubble up inside me when I heard this. The message that eating food with your hands is an unmannered way to eat is a real problem for me because it is dripping with the control and shame of colonization, which is particularly dangerous in an educational context. Suggesting that a child who eats with their hands has no manners is an echo of European colonial powers looking to tame the wildness out of the people they controlled. These European table manners were imposed on conquered people in an attempt to civilize them. It's a damaging message about right and wrong ways to do things. It positions the techniques as superior and the people who practice it as the setters of the standard, leaving those with a different approach to eating with a status of inferiority. The idea of a single standard to have acceptable table manners is just one of the host of strategies used to grow and promote racism. It's a subtle message, but one that is reinforced 3 times a day, every day, which makes it quite powerful. For the love of God. For the most part in her essay, she complains that certain manners are for certain foods. Chopsticks for sushi, hands for naan, which makes sense, and we do that miles. But if you're a Western prep school, you need to use table manners of the West. It's not racist. It's giving respect to the culture you're in. You're not in China. We eat rice with forks here in the West. If you're in China, then you probably want to put the fork down. I don't think this has anything to do with colonialism. But with respecting the culture you're in, respecting diversity in cultural backgrounds and food traditions is essential, especially in a country as multicultural as Canada, wrote Maharaj, totally unironically. The West has a culture, and forks are a big part of that. Isn't it funny how all cultures are diverse and worthy of respect except Western, European, Canadian, and American cultures? Don't want to keep up with these people. Can't do it. Not going to. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. So there. There you have it. There it is. Oh, does it ever end with these people? No, it does not. Now, some of you are wondering, what the hell is going on? Well, Jerry Nadler and the impeachment inquiry. This is from CNS News. Post this on from C-SPAN. He refuses to argue about nomenclature. Well, let's listen. You can hear it for yourself.
This committee is engaged in an investigation that will allow us to determine whether to recommend articles of impeachment with respect to President Trump. That is what we are doing. Some call this process an impeachment inquiry. Some call it an impeachment investigation. There is no legal difference between these terms, and I no longer care to argue about the nomenclature. Let me clear up any remaining doubt. The conduct under investigation poses a threat to our democracy. We have an obligation to respond to this threat, and we are doing so. Under the procedures outlined in this resolution, we will hold hearings that allow us to further consider the evidence against the President. At those hearings, in addition to member questioning, we will allow staff counsel to participate for 1 hour per witness, evenly divided between the majority and the minority. This will allow us to develop the record in ways that the 5-minute rule does not always permit. We will also allow the President to respond to the evidence in writing and on the record. No matter how we may disagree with him, President Trump is entitled to respond to the evidence in this way. And we will treat certain sensitive evidence, such as grand jury information, as being received in executive session. Under these procedures, when we have finished these hearings and considered as much evidence as we are able to gather, we will then decide whether to refer articles of impeachment to the House floor. We have a constitutional, historical, and moral obligation to fully investigate these matters and to make that decision.
Well, there you go. That's Nadler. They are looking for anything after their Russia claims and hoaxes absolutely fell apart. Now there's grasping. You know what they remind me of? Nadler and the Dumbs that they're on the Judiciary Committee. We've all heard it. Some of you probably even seen it. The drowning man. He's flopping around in the water, trying to stay above the water before he sinks and drowns. This is what they look like. Flailing about in the water, thrashing about, trying to tread water, trying to stay above the waves before he sinks to the bottom. This is what they're doing. You know, at some point in time, you know, it's interesting because today Pelosi is supposed to meet with her caucus and try to get them, good luck, try to get them into one bunch, one mind, one track, and do something. Pelosi is not in favor of impeachment because she knows what will happen in 2020. It will come back to bite them on the backside, and it should. However, she cannot control the far leftist of her caucus. She can't do it. She's tried. The last time she tried, she was called a racist. Go figure. So you watch what happens. Now, we talked about red flag laws last week. Give me this. And you remember, it had already been pointed out, I believe, is in Oregon, maybe even Portland for that matter. Antifa went ahead and reported some conservatives, mainly the people that they battle against in the streets, as having firearms and being dangerous, and the government goes, okay, dum-de-dum-de-dum. They go out there to confiscate this guy's firearms. This is a problem with red flag laws. You get into a tiff with your neighbor, and he knows you have firearms. Hello? Yeah, this is Pinky, and I'm mad. And here we go. And he talks about his, my neighbor has firearms, and he's said, I heard him say he's going to go out and shoot up a school bus. Next thing you know, you hear the, hello, we want your guns. There you go. Don't believe it can't happen. It can and it will. Government has no controls on itself. And in fact, Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, one of my personal favorites, listen to what he has to say about this.
If the House Judiciary passes this bill today, we will have changed a fundamental and sacred principle in this country. In America, you are innocent until proven guilty, until today. If we pass this bill today, we are going to invert the standard and say you are guilty until proven innocent. And you will be guilty without doing anything wrong. Under this bill, you are guilty without doing anything wrong simply because someone thinks you might do something wrong. And who's the someone under this bill who can petition a court to take away your Second Amendment liberties? Who is the someone defined under this bill? Page 13, amendment of nature substitute. The chairman just introduced it. Top of page 13, it says family or household member. Go down to subsection D. Who's a household member? An individual who resides or who has resided with the respondent during the past year. A roommate who hung out with you for 1 month last year can go petition a court to take away your Second Amendment liberties. Some roommate maybe didn't like you. Some thought you were a slob, whatever, can go petition the court to take away your fundamental right without you doing anything wrong. And oh, guess what? Guess what? When they go in the court to take away your fundamental liberty, even though you haven't done anything, committed no crime, guess what? You don't even get to be there. You don't even get to defend yourself. That's exactly what this bill does. And Mr. Raskin has talked about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. I heard him on TV talk about it. I heard him twice now in this committee hearing today talk about it. And that's how we're going to take away someone's Second Amendment liberties. And this is the House Judiciary Committee, for goodness sake. What other constitutional right can you lose without doing anything wrong and without your knowledge and then have to go petition a court to get it back? Tell me what that is.
I'm happy to answer.
That happens. Tell me when that happens. This bill is so wrong on so many levels. It violates fundamental Second Amendment rights. It violates property rights. It violates due process rights. And yet today, the House Judiciary Committee, with the storied history this committee has in defending the Bill of Rights, is going to pass this legislation. I mean, this is scary. This is a scary road to start heading down.
There you go. And he's right. He's right. Oh, where does it end for these? Where does it end? I don't know. I just know that the red flag laws will be abused. Now, don't forget, there's nothing in the law that says, well, yes, the government took my firearms, of course I get them back. There's nothing that says that the firearm will be in the same condition that you get back that what was taken, i.e., they can make the weapon inoperable. They can sit there and throw it in salt water if they want to. They can do anything they want to it, but they have to give it back to you. It's stuff like that. And I'm not saying it's okay even after they give it back to you. Well, then, so as long as you get back to the same condition in which it was taken. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not doing that at all. I'm not agreeing with it. I disagree with it. And something you have to remember, too. Government is the final arbiter of its own power. Think about that. And not just our government, any government. Any government, no matter what you name, what philosophy it follows, is always going to be the final arbiter of its own power. Think about that. And we're seeing this play out more and more, especially here in the United States, because, well, we have a tendency, we got some really decent people out there looking and reporting, saying this is what's going on with our government, this is what they said, this is what they're doing. And as we've all pointed out before, if Hillary had won the election, we would have never known about the coup attempt. Never known. And they rigged the election primary for her, and she still couldn't win. But anyways, something to understand. You all remember Michael Flynn. He got screwed over. Well, new things are about to happen. Here we have Hannity talking to Michael Flynn's attorney, who is now accused the special counsel's office of prosecutorial misconduct. Listen to this. No. Apparently, hold on. We got to figure this out. And I'm going to figure it out now, because now I'm irritated. Now I'm irritated with them. So let me figure it out. I'm going to get back to you on this, because this is important stuff. It truly is. All right. Went to look for the information you heard from this, but unfortunately, it has been removed. But that's okay. I can still tell you about it. Michael Flynn's attorney is Sidney Powell. She's done an excellent, excellent job for him. But this is a little twist here, and you need to understand what the government did, especially Rosensnake, a.k.a. Rosenstein. Michael Flynn and his attorney Sidney Powell returned to federal court for a status hearing before Judge Emmett Sullivan. Now, generally, status hearings are uneventful. However, this hearing falls on the heels of an explosive filing by Flynn's defense outlining allegations of serious prosecutorial misconduct and claims the DOJ is withholding Brady material. No, not Brady Bunch stuff. What the Brady material is basically discovery. And it's very basic. It happens in court every day. And basically what it is both sides have to share with each other the information they have. So that way there's no Perry Mason moments in court. Your Honor, I have a surprise witness. No, that's not how it works. That's just Hollywood. That's what they're talking about. So she was on Hannity. Her and Judge Janine and Hannity were all on. And apparently, Ms. Powell has confirmed something we previously presented, and that is Rosenstein has authorized Mueller to target Michael Flynn Jr., that's the general's son, in order to provide leverage for General Flynn to do a guilty plea. In other words, they're dangling out the kid to get the dad. Now, according to Hap-Tip Technofog, the DOJ prosecutor, Brandon Van Grack, has not filed a response to the Flynn defense motion. However, both sides argued some of the specifics in court. So, for scheduling, a date of September 24th, which is about 10 days from now, was sent to Judge Sullivan for the written DOJ response to Flynn's accusations of Brady violations. Thereafter, the defense rebuttal to the DOJ response is due October 15th. Then a hearing date of October 31st is scheduled for Sullivan to question Both teams centered around the filings. Now, a tentative sentencing date was scheduled for December 18th as a matter of a formal proceeding. Now, according to Tone, Judge Sullivan appeared to be open to the defense presentations and established during his statements that the plea agreement was between Flynn and the DOJ and did not bind his court. Therefore, Sullivan's prior order on Brady discovery supersedes any agreement between the defense and the prosecution, and the judge is correct in that. According to the transcript, it starts on line 8, and basically it says this, and it's the judge speaking. He says, "And let me just refer to the plea agreement that says at page 6 under trial rights sentence 2, quote, your client, Mr. Flynn, agrees to forego the right to any further discovery or disclosures of information not already provided at the time of the entry of your client's guilty plea," end quote. And the court emphasizes that's an agreement between the parties. Had this court even taken the plea, actually, the court did not take a plea. It took the second plea. But had the court taken the first plea, that provision is not binding on the court. That's an agreement between the parties. So notwithstanding that information in the plea agreement or any statement therein or subsequent thereto that suggests Mr. Flynn has waived his right to further discovery, the government must comply with the court's standing Brady order of February 16, 2018, or at some point demonstrate why it should not be required to comply with that. So thus the court has established, despite the plea agreement, the DOJ is still responsible for delivering exculpatory Brady evidence that is relevant to the purpose of court proceedings, including material that should be considered for sentencing. Now, after the hearing, Ms. Powell, discussing Brady material, showed Michael Flynn did not commit any FARA, that's the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is a lobbying violation. Judge Sullivan gave an example of how the court considered Brady value around the evidence of a FARA violation or that thereof. Now, in prior proceedings, the DOJ implied benefit within the plea deal because Mr. Flynn was not charged with lobbying or FARA violations. The absence of legal responsibility would be considered a benefit to the defendant by the court. However, if the actual evidence does not support the existence of a FARA violation, then the court would be mistakenly considering a benefit within the plea. Now, Ms. Powell has confirmed the example according to the transcript. She says, starting on line 8, so if you're saying there was no factual predicate for that FARA violation, then it should not have been mentioned at all as a potential quote-unquote benefit because that's something the court will take into consideration. Ms. Powell says exactly. The court says, so that's a good point. Ms. Powell says, among other things, yes. The court says, all right. So I'll wait for your reply to find out what the other things are unless you want to tell me today. Now, the bottom line is Judge Sullivan is open to reviewing all the exculpatory evidence that is required by his standing Brady order. This is helpful to Flynn's defense because it puts the DOJ on notice that they must provide a fulsome picture of the Flynn case to both the defendant and the court. Now, Ms. Powell then highlighted some of the particular concerns surrounding Missy Brady evidence. For example, the DOJ sat on the page Strzok text for months in violation of the court's discovery order. Ms. Powell says, and this is from the transcript, there is far more at stake here than sentencing. As new counsel, we have an ethical obligation to review everything that has happened in the case or not happened, as the case may be, and that is why we filed a motion to compel production of Brady material. There have been stunning failures to produce Brady in this case, going back as far as July 2017, when the government had to page Strzok text messages and special counsel was informed of that, sufficient to cause the removal of Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page. Yet not a single page Strzok text message was produced to the defense until, and the court interrupts and says, do you contend that the information is exculpatory insofar as Mr. Flynn is concerned? Ms. Powell says yes. Now, prosecutor Brandon Von Grack then countered Ms. Powell by saying the DOJ, quote-unquote, notified the defendant that such communications existed. Starting on line 1, this is also from the transcript. Counsel raised was that the defendant was unaware of the text message between Strzok and Page that were made available or disclosed in 2017. There are 2 points on that. First, before the defendant signed his guilty plea, before his first plea of guilty before Judge Contreras, the government had notified the defendant and his counsel that such communications existed in which the agent, Peter Strzok, had shown a preference for one of the president's candidates for president. So they were aware that communications existed before the public was aware of them and signed the first plea agreement and took a plea before Judge Contreras. Then, before the second time he pled guilty before this court, the defendant was made aware of the remaining text messages that exist. And the government provided text messages that were not available to the public that the government believed were relevant to this particular proceeding. That's the first point. But notice, that the DOJ doesn't say they made the text available to Flynn prior to his plea agreement November 30th, 2017. Only that they informed him communications existed. Then after Flynn signed the plea agreement, and after Page Strzok test Republic, at the second sentencing hearing, December 2018, there were texts provided that were not available to the public. That's a rather stunning admission because the DOJ is admitting the special counsel hid text messages from within the batches that were released to the public. The special counsel later showed these exculpatory text messages to Flynn's defense, knowing they held a Brady value and knowing the defense would be unable to make them public. Now, consider these hidden text messages pertaining to evidence of Flynn's innocence. We can only imagine what those text messages are. So let's move on. Additionally, Ms. Powell highlighted 2 more documents of the Department of Justice National Security Division, that's Jesse Liu again, refuses to produce. The court says, this is from the transcript, the court says, keep in mind what Eunice says. Eunice says it has to be more than just theoretical relevance. Ms. Powell says, oh, yes, sir. The court says, right. Ms. Powell says, yes. I think exonerating Mr. Flynn of being an agent of Russia on January 30th, 2017, and just from the news last night, we learned that there's a memo or something from Mr. McCabe also saying there's no Logan Act violation for Mr. Flynn as of February 8th. So that means Mr. Comey lied to the face of the president, among other things, on February 14th, just a few days later, and then started a whole obstruction of justice narrative based on what was said about Mr. Flynn in that meeting with the president. Now, this is new. A Russian agent exoneration memo dated 1/30/17 that apparently originated from inside the DOJ. Line 19. The court says, all right. Ms. Powell says, so it's a huge factor. We've also learned that there was a letter dated January 30th, 2017, or an internal memo from the Department of Justice that completely exonerates Mr. Flynn of being an agent of Russia, and that document has not been produced to us yet. The court says, all right, you're going to address, and... So number 2, a DOJ memo clearing Flynn of the Logan Act on 2/8/17. Remember, the Logan Act said by Sally Yates to be a big part of the reason for the FBI to interview Flynn. Then Ms. Powell went on to discuss the issues surrounding the missing notes from FBI agents Joseph Pientka and the original 302s written by Pientka. The DOJ says they don't have it. According to the transcript, the court says, you're referring to the 302s in that regard, right? Ms. Powell says, the 302s and notes underline the 302s. We've already, for example, identified material differences between the agent's notes from their interviews of Mr. Flynn on the 24th and the 302 they produced. We're missing the original 302 by Mr. Pientka, which, according to the FBI rules, had to have been written within 5 days of their interview of Mr. Flynn. That has never been produced to this court. They say they don't have it, but it would certainly be in the FBI's computer system. Things don't disappear like that, so that still needs to be produced. Now, Judge Sullivan asked Ms. Powell if she was going to withdraw the guilty plea based on the direction she was going. Ms. Powell said no and pointed to the possibility of dismissal based on wrongful prosecution and a case that would have never been brought at all if the evidence was visible. Again, according to the transcript. So I guess your argument would be, in that regard, at sentencing, the court should not consider that a benefit to Mr. Flynn because there had been no factual or legal basis for that charge. Ms. Powell says no. I think the point is going to be that there is an egregious government misconduct and long-time suppression of crucial Brady material that should have been provided to the defense before there was ever a plea. But Mr. Van Grack told counsel he didn't have an ethical or legal obligation to produce anything pre-plea, and then post-plea he's maintained he has no obligation to produce because he pled guilty. So I'm trying to figure out how the government conceives of its Brady obligations in this case, because it seems to be that it doesn't have one. And it views evidence that is exculpatory as inculpatory. And this court knows from the Stevens case, more often than not, so not just the January 30th memo exonerating him of being an agent of Russia, there's one thing after the other that we can document that exonerates Mr. Flynn in any number of ways. Now, that'll be interesting to see the official response to the DOJ to all the claims and accusations, and that's due in 10 days. Now, it's worth noting, according to Mark Meadows, the Office of Inspector General Michael Horowitz has interviewed Agent Pienka extensively. Prior attempts by Congress to gain testimony from Pienka were blocked by the FBI and Rod Rosenstein. Agent Pienka was never interviewed by the Joint House Judiciary and Oversight Committees, that's Good Latin Gowdy. The reason explained by Meadows was simple. Pienka was on Weissman and Mueller's special counsel team. Congress was not allowed to interfere in the Mueller probe. In hindsight, this looks like Weissman, Mueller, and Rosenstein strategically using the investigation as a shield from sunlight. So the the Flynn interview took place on January 24th, 2017. The Pienka report was written January 24th, 2017. The wording was then deliberated by a small group approved by FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and entered into record on February 15th. So you see what's going on here. It just goes on and on and on. It's just ridiculous. There's no rhyme or reason for it. And that's why we have what we have. All right. I only got like a few minutes. I want to encourage you. No, not yet. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm not going to get caught up in it again. We got some things. I'm working on some things. I'm going to meet with some people here at CRN. I think you'll like what you hear if it works out the way I think it does. I don't want to put you on the hook for any of that stuff, but I just want you to understand what's going on. What do we got here? 40 items have been requested by the Flynn defense. They've unsealed the Flynn Brady motion. Ta-da. 40 bullet points that are outlining material sought by Michael Flynn. And, of course, we just talked about that. 40th thing. You know, I can see the court, if the government has refused to divulge Brady evidence, there are going to be some issues. Serious issues. But the question is, again, like you, I'm tired of waiting for the shoe to drop. But like I said, the word is that AUSA Dunham already has sealed indictments, and there are more to come. That much I'm aware of. All right. You like CRN, so do I. Get the word out to your friends. Let them listen to it. Around the world, I want to say thank you for our listeners. Believe it, we have a listener in Russia. Yeah, we do. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland. That's got to be Porky Wheel. We have Canada. So, we are watching what's going on in Canada. They're having their own issues with their own liberal press, Antifa, and other things. But we're keeping an eye on it. We're going to see. I'm trying to get Stefanos Karatopoulos. He's a lawyer up in Canada, very heavily engaged in the fight against the liberals up there. Trying to get him on here, scheduled for an interview. In the meantime, if you like us, please visit ContraRadioNetwork.podbean.com. Throw me a couple bucks so we can keep this going. It's going to be really interesting as time goes on. So, in the meantime, remember, you can vote your way into socialism, but you got to shoot your way out. That's the way it is. Until then, I'm John Jeffers saying thank you for listening and watching. If you're going to watch the video, it will be posted. Thanks again. We really appreciate it.